The lieutenant governor calls for changes in the Texas lottery after scouting out the store that sold a jackpot-winning ticket.
To sell lottery tickets, you have to sell multiple items. They sell board games. So it's just a ruse, in my view, to get around selling lottery tickets.
His visit leads to an ultimatum, raising questions about the future of the lottery in Texas. The Texas House has been the place where plans for school choice died in previous sessions. This year could be different.
He raised his hand and said that he, as Speaker, supports school choice in the state of Texas.
New legislation in the House has supporters optimistic. Now opponents are fighting back. People waiting for mental health help, dying in jail. Our investigation reveals new data about deaths on the wait list and what one lawmaker says Texas needs to do now.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. $83.5 million. That was the jackpot in last weekend's Lotto Texas drawing. The winning ticket was printed at this storefront in Austin, but purchased remotely by someone using the Jackpocket app. Jackpocket is known as a lottery courier. Players pick numbers on their phones and Jackpocket places the picks for them, later sending a scanned version of the ticket. News of this latest jackpot win and others tied to lottery couriers got the attention of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He told our Capitol reporter Adam Schwager that he believes couriers violate the spirit of Texas law, and he's calling for change.
Let me just say it is a hard line. Couriers have to go.
That's Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
The way the lottery was established was to buy cash tickets.
He's taking aim at companies that allow Texans to buy lottery tickets from the comfort of their couch using an app. The Texas Lottery Commission is up for a sunset review, meaning the legislature has to pass a bill extending the agency. If they don't pass anything,
and the lottery will be out of existence in June.
And Patrick says it won't pass unless the lottery makes significant changes and a bill is passed to ban courier services. Some senators agree.
I don't know if there's a will, honestly, in the legislature to reauthorize them if they don't comply with the law.
Jackpocket CEO Peter Sullivan hopes Patrick changes his mind.
This type of playing allows people that may be elderly, may not be able to get to a retail location in time, maybe somewhere rural that doesn't have a retailer next to them.
The application, which was bought by DraftKings last May, sold the winning ticket for Lotto Texas's $83.5 million jackpot this week, the fifth largest win in the game's history.
They are a Texas resident, and they have been a player on the app for nearly 5 years.
The day after, Patrick paid them an impromptu visit to their storefront, Winner's Corner, where they process mobile ticket orders in the back.
I think is in violation of the spirit of the law. To sell lottery tickets, you have to sell multiple items. They sell board games. So it's just a ruse, in my view, to get around selling lottery tickets.
And although they didn't let him take video, in the back, Patrick saw
our count was somewhere around 30 terminals just running, spitting out tickets.
But Sullivan says it's just how the system is supposed to work.
Retailers are able to get provided additional resources and terminals based on the volume of sales.
Adam joins us now. You also stopped by the Winner's Corner location that the Lieutenant Governor checked out. What did you see there?
Yeah, so when I first went out there, I went out and I saw a building. It was across the street from a strip mall. So at first when I pulled up, I thought, oh, maybe it's in this strip mall. That's where they get their foot traffic, but it's across the street. The windows were completely actually blacked out. You had to physically enter the store to see anything inside, at least that building. So when I started shooting some video of the outside of the building, someone came out of the back of the building and they started talking to me, and they started explaining what their operation was. And behind her, I could see all those terminals that the Lieutenant Governor was referencing that were churning out that material. Of course, I asked if I could go back there and check it out. They politely told me no, and here's a media contact who we then used to reach out and talk to the Jackpocket CEO, as you just saw right there.
Well, certainly a lot to see there, I guess. But, you know, when we talk about the lottery, we hear that it brings in a lot of money for schools and veterans in Texas. You've talked to the lawmakers who want tighter restrictions on the lottery. Are they worried about the effect that all of this could have on funding?
You know, I talked to Senator Bob Hall because he was the first person when I've been talking to this who really floated that idea of dissolving the Lottery Commission to me. And I was like, so what would happen to the lottery? He says, it goes away. the way he sees it, he said he's run the numbers. He only sees it as being about 3 out of 365 days of funding the Texas government, and he thinks they can make that up, especially with the surplus they have. But I will say, in 2013, the last time they were up for sunset review, the House initially voted to sunset the Lottery Commission, but then they went in a room, discussed it, decided, hey, this actually might be too big of an impact on our budget, and then re-voted and then let the Lottery Commission continue to operate. So who knows, after they actually take a deeper look at the numbers, as to what that actually is bringing in and how lawmakers feel about that.
And might change their mind again. You've also reported on the future of sports gambling in Texas. Does this increased scrutiny of the lottery affect the potential for sports betting legislation?
Well, you know, it was one of the first stories I worked on here, and when I was talking to the Lieutenant Governor, he mentioned the name DraftKings, the owner of Jackpot, multiple times. And at one point, he did tell me, he said, look, I'm going to paraphrase him a little bit here, obviously, because I don't have the quote right in front of me, but he said, look, if we can't get this system in place to where we can trust our lottery, I don't know if we can take that next step towards sports gambling. And right, notoriously, Lieutenant Governor has been one of the biggest obstacles in order to get that legislation on the Senate floor to even have a vote on sports gambling they haven't been able to take in the past.
So this is your first appearance on State of Texas. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
You're the newest member of our Capitol Bureau, and we just want to welcome you officially and welcome aboard.
Oh, it feels great to be here, and I'm glad to be digging into the stories that matter to Texas.
All right, keep it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sometimes a public school environment just doesn't meet the needs of children.
New legislation in the Texas House would provide billions in new funding for public schools and help parents pay for private school. We look closer at the plan and how opponents are pushing back. People dying in jail waiting for mental health help at a state hospital. Our ongoing investigation reveals the total number of deaths on this wait list and what one senator says Texas should do about it. We're getting our first look at legislation in the Texas House to provide billions in new funding for public schools and create an education savings account program. The House education bills come 2 weeks after the Senate passed its own ESA bill. Governor Abbott calls it school choice, and it's one of his top priorities. Capitol reporter McKim breaks down the bill package and the criticism over the potential impact on public schools.
Governor Greg Abbott is going around the state to advocate for school choice.
I am all in.
On Wednesday, at the Texas Policy Summit, he said House Speaker Dustin Burrows is on his side.
He raised his hand and said that he, as Speaker, supports school choice in the state of Texas.
The Texas House is a hurdle school choice has not been able to get over in the past. Now we're getting a look at what House members will consider. State Representative Brad Buckley filed the bill.
And sometimes a public school environment just doesn't meet the needs of children.
It will give each student 85% of what the average public school student gets from state and local dollars. According to his office, that's a little more than $10,000 per year. The bill also prioritizes students with disabilities and low-income families. On top of that, he also filed a school finance bill that will increase the basic allotment by $220 per student. Schools can use that money to pay for operations and give teachers pay raises.
Provides more flexibility so local school districts can respond to the needs in the areas and the markets that they're in.
But it will face opposition from House Democrats, who say the basic allotment increase is far from enough.
This bill is inadequate, it's insufficient, and when you pair it with the voucher bill, it's going to take far more money out of our schools than could ever be put in this session.
There will once again be a battle on the House floor over the future of Texas education, and the outcome.
We'll have vigorous, respectful debate, many different ideas, but I believe that this bill will pass.
I've been hearing that since 2023. Voucher proponents have a habit of declaring victory prematurely.
Is still unclear.
Dylan joins us now. We've reported on the Senate's ESA bill, SB 2, which passed 2 weeks ago. How does the House version differ from the Senate's version?
Well, they both do the same thing, right? The main principal function is that they're going to provide money to a student, a certain amount of money that's going to go towards paying for either homeschooling or private school tuition. But they really differ in how they get to that number. The Senate bill's version that was authored by Senator Brandon Creighton, that provides a flat rate $10,000 to each student and $11,500 for each student with a disability. Of course, that differs with how the House version is, which is 85% of what they would have been making, what those students would be making at a public school. And it also has a difference in prioritization because 80% of the Senate's version is for low income and students with disabilities, and to be considered low income, that is 500% of the poverty line. So any family with that income in that range from 0 to 500% of the federal poverty line, you're considered in the same basket, the same group with the same chance of getting the ESA. Whereas in the House actually creates a priority list where the top of the list is students with disabilities. Next to that is students under the 200% poverty line, and then it gets further and further down until the very last is just any student that makes over, or any family I should say, that makes over 500% of the poverty line. So those are the two really main differences in these bills. Senator Creighton also promised to pass teacher pay raises. Yep. How would that bill work? Yeah, this is SB 26. It just passed out of the Education Committee in the Senate unanimously, so both Democrats and Republicans supporting it. And the big thing here is that it's actually creating a permanent allotment in in public school funding. So it's called the Teacher Retention and Pay Raise Allotment. And what that would do is $5 billion into that allotment, and it is solely for schools to use that money to offer pay raises to their teachers. Everyone that spoke in the committee, all the senators, like I said, both Democrats, Republicans, very excited about this because this not only creates a permanent allotment for teacher pay raise, but it also provides some relief to the basic allotment, which we always talk about. That is the minimum amount of money that a school district will receive every year from the state, and that's about $6,160. They would usually, the school district, use that money to help with teacher pay raise. Now that there's a separate allotment for that, they can use that money to pay for like other staff, like nurses, school bus drivers, counselors, to help with retaining those employees as well. Certainly a lot of people interested in these topics. Of course, yes. Thank you very much, Dylan. For 5 years, we've been investigating the challenges people face in Texas jails while waiting for mental health help before standing trial. In our research, we discovered people dying while on the wait list for a state hospital bed. Now we've learned the alarming total number of those deaths and what one state senator says could help Texas tackle these mental competency consequences. At latest count, people were waiting in Texas jails an average 233 days for a maximum security state hospital bed to have their competency restored. By law, they must receive that critical mental health treatment before they can stand trial and actively participate in the court process. But 233 days is a dramatic drop from the record just a few years ago when people waited a record average 827 days. The number of people on that list has dropped too, from more than 2,500 a few years ago to fewer than 1,800 today. In that time, we've continued asking the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, what about the people waiting so long they die before getting help? The agency wasn't tracking that statistic then, and it isn't now. But lawmakers last legislative session directed the state auditor to take a one-time look at that number, among others. And the pieced together snapshot showed at least 54 people have died on the wait list since 2018, most of those in jail, something their loved ones say should never have happened. What do you think when you hear that number?
Well, I mean, I think of my brother. For first thing I do is I think about my brother. He's one of those statistics.
Walter Macias doesn't like to recount what his family faced in 2018, but he continues telling the story, hoping leaders will act after hearing about his brother, Fernando.
He was very intelligent. He did very well in school. He was, always studious, and just almost like one day when he was like 21 years old, I just got word that he had a mental breakdown. I didn't know that it was that severe, but ever since that time, he was pretty much a different person. It wasn't the same brother that I knew.
Fernando was diagnosed with manic depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder. Eventually, he was living with their elderly mother, who had helped care for him as his health failed.
So all those years of medication took a toll on his body, and some of his kidneys were the thing that in the end that started, he started deteriorating the most from his kidneys, and he was having to go on dialysis.
Walter says at age 61, his brother had stopped taking his medication and began to lose his sense of reality. It led to a welfare check and police surrounding his Bexar County home.
My mother was in the house, and that she was in a wheelchair, 84 years old in a wheelchair.
Their mother was killed in the shootout. Fernando faced 3 counts of attempted capital murder of a police officer.
He went into the county jail, and they deemed him to be mentally incompetent to stand trial.
A state jail standards report detailed his repeated refusal of medical services, food, and dialysis, and his declining health related to kidney disease and diabetes.
He wound up dying at the county jail because he could not get the kind of help he needed to get him stable.
It's really tragic. The people are dying while waiting for care. We don't know the causal relationship between their death and their psychiatric circumstances because we're not studying it.
State Senator Sarah Eckhart filed a bill last legislative session to study the availability of state hospital beds and their projected need, an effort to gather data to better implement solutions, including the prevention of deaths on the wait list. It passed the Senate, but not the House.
We are relying on a patchwork of data, and therefore we are left blind as to what we're facing.
This session, she refiled the bill. Why do you think that the state still doesn't track deaths?
I think the state isn't tracking it because they're afraid to know. They're afraid to know.
So the study you're proposing maybe could be a good first step toward regular tracking.
I think regular tracking is absolutely essential, and if we want to wrap our arms around the escalating costs at the local level, if we're going to blame the locals for coming up with solutions that cost property tax dollars, maybe we should take a look at ourselves first to see what kind of investments we're making at the state level.
Since the beginning of last session, the number of usable state hospital beds has risen substantially, from around 1,500 to 2,000 total available today. That includes an increase from fewer than 200 to nearly 350 available maximum security beds today. The type Fernando was awaiting, just like hundreds of other people now, even with these improvements.
I think the state's going to have to step up and build more facilities and understand that the situation, I mean, it's a public safety issue. It's an issue that can happen to any family. We had a good, loving family, and this changed everything.
Health and Human Services says adding beds has definitely helped the wait list, crediting state leaders for investing in expanding, renovating, and building new hospital facilities across Texas in recent years. The state has also purchased private beds in the community to free up space at state hospitals for competency restoration cases. It's also created 15 outpatient restoration programs and contracted with 18 jail-based programs across Texas since last session, and added more than 1,600 staff positions to state hospitals since then. Still, as of last month's HHSC committee meeting monitoring the wait list, deaths were not part of its regular tracking and did not come up in the discussion, despite our repeated questions. We'll keep you updated on any moves that might change that in the future. Catch up on our complete coverage on our website. Just click on this week's State of Texas story and scroll to the Mental Competency Consequences link. Texas could be on the path to invest in cryptocurrency. We look at what lawmakers are considering and why some people are raising concern. The state of Texas could begin investing in Bitcoin. Lawmakers got their first look at a bill to create a cryptocurrency reserve. Supporters believe crypto could help the state's bottom line. As Kevin Baskar reports, the idea is also raising concern.
Seeking for an alternative to the dollar.
Cryptocurrency is what people believe is, in this case, Bitcoin, finite and decentralized, and something that they don't have to worry about governments printing more and more money.
Texas Senator Charles Schwager is behind the bill to establish the Texas Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. The Business and Commerce Committee held a hearing on the proposal on Tuesday. He says the creation will protect the economy from inflation.
People are really worried about federal overspending. That's been going on decades, and the inflation that engenders.
It can be very, very volatile.
Kendall Garrison, the CEO of Amplify Credit Union, explains the possible pitfalls of a crypto reserve.
Switching from very safe investments that the state of Texas has today, like government bonds, index funds, hedge fund investments, moving to cryptocurrency is really increasing the risk in that portfolio.
But Schwager doesn't think it's as risky as what it seems to be.
Bitcoin in particular is the largest cryptocurrency, the one that trades the largest volume, and I think it has the least amount of overall volatility.
What I would suggest is they have a very strong, very well thought out investment policy that has stop loss built into it. So if it decreases more than X%, then you exit those investments. And on the other side of the coin, if it increases more than X%, you harvest some of the profits.
Kevin Bosker, State of Texas.
The bill calls for creating a reserve overseen by the Texas Comptroller. Senators left the measure pending in committee. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.